The knife slipped through the steak like velvet, but Logan's voice cut sharper. "Trying to impress the waiter, Mom? Or yourself?" He didn't laugh outright, but the curl at the corner of his mouth said enough. His fiancée stifled a giggle in her wine glass, her shoulders trembling with the effort. The rest of the table lingered in that awkward balance between polite silence and quiet amusement, waiting to see whether I would flinch. I didn't. Not yet. The black titanium card sat between my fingers, smooth, cold, weighty. I hadn't even extended it to the server, but already the judgment had begun, carried on the low hum of family laughter. My son leaned back in his chair, smug arms crossed, his bravado filling the space like cheap cologne. "Mom, really," he added, louder this time, "this isn't necessary. You don't have to do this show every year." Show, the word settled like dust in my chest. It wasn't a show, it was dinner. My birthday dinner. The server, a young man whose hands were steadier than mine ever were at his age, reached for the card with practiced grace. His eyes flicked briefly to Logan, then back to me. Polite confusion hovered in that glance. Hesitation, too. I gave him a small nod. He left around me. The restaurant hummed with an energy I hadn't asked for. Private wine room, low golden lights, linens heavy enough to smother a fire. Logan's idea of elegance. Not mine, I had suggested. Something smaller. A bistro tucked into my neighborhood with mismatched chairs and a menu that smelled like home. But Logan had insisted. He said I deserved something grand. I had agreed, though I knew grand meant spectacle for him, not comfort for me. He tapped his fingers against the table now, as if marking time to his own arrogance. "Maybe your little pension hit its limit," he muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. The words didn't sting. Not yet. But they lingered, echoing louder than the jazz spilling softly from the corner of the room. When the server returned, his face carried the kind of tension no training manual could prepare him for. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said quietly, "but the card didn't go through. Would you like to try another?" The silence after that was a living thing. I didn't hear it first, I felt it. The air shifting. Leah's faint gasp. Logan's sharp snort of satisfaction. His fiancée muttered, "God, this is embarrassing." I didn't blink. I didn't twitch. But something in me fractured. Something that had been buried under years of sacrifice and quiet. I had wanted a warm evening, nothing more. Candles, laughter, a chance to remember what family felt like. I had carried that small wish all day, like a secret. And now it crumbled under the weight of my son's laughter. It wasn't new, their assumptions about me. To them, I was the widow in sensible shoes who carried peppermints in her purse and clipped coupons from the Sunday paper. Sweet, harmless, a little naive. They had chosen that version of me, and I had let them, because it was easier. Because it kept them comfortable. They didn't know about the mornings I scrubbed office floors until my knuckles cracked. About the weekends I worked weddings while my own friends laughed at barbecues. About the ring I sold when Logan's acceptance letter arrived in the mail. He never knew. None of them did. Now he sat across from me, smirking as if life had always owed him. As if I hadn't carved out every opportunity he ever touched with my own two hands. "You don't have to pretend anymore," he said, folding his arms like a man delivering a lecture. "We can cover you. Just admit it." The words didn't hurt. They settled like ash over wounds too old to sting. I studied him, not the man. He was now full of arrogance and teeth-butt, the boy who once tugged at my sleeve in the grocery store, whispering if we could afford the real orange juice this week. Now he was offering to cover me. Leah leaned in, wearing the brittle smile she saved for family gatherings. "Mom, there's no shame in asking for help. Maybe it's time to talk to someone about managing what you have left. What I have left." I almost laughed. What I had left could fund 3 lifetimes of theirs. What I had left employed 200 people. What I had left had designed evenings in this very restaurant chain that ran smoother than their entire marriage. But I stayed silent. Logan's laugh followed, low and sharp. A black card, Mom. Seriously. Maybe it came from one of those scam catalogs. The air thinned, sharp with their amusement. The server hovered near the table, unsure if he should vanish or intervene. I looked at him. Would you be kind enough, I asked gently, to send your manager to our table? Logan blinked. Why? So you can escalate your fake card to corporate. I didn't answer. I folded the card back into my wallet.com as if this were part of the evening I had planned. Because in a way, it was the door to the kitchen opened. And there he was. Miles adjusting his blazer, scanning the room. He didn't walk toward me. He rushed. The panic in his eyes was unmistakable, the kind that only appears when someone realizes they've mishandled someone who should never have been mishandled. When he reached the table, his words dropped like a stone in water. Miss Thornton, I'm so sorry for the confusion. Your card was flagged because our system still shows an outstanding balance. Our chain owes you over $500,000. We cannot process charges against clients to whom we are financially indebted. Double quotes, silence. Not a single fork moved. Not a single glass clinked. I watched Logan's mouth open, then close. Leah's eyes widened, her cheeks blooming with color. His fiancée blinked at me like I had unzipped a disguise in front of her. It was the silence I'd been waiting for. I nodded once. I understand. No harm done. Miles bowed slightly, stepping back. The poor server shifted, unsure if he should clear the plates or crawl beneath the floor. And I turned, meeting my son's stunned stare. I never said I was retired. I said evenly. You just assumed I had nothing left to build. Suspense lingered, thicker than the wine on the table. They didn't know yet, not the whole of it. That would come later. For now, I let the silence do the work, because suspense is a slow knife. And I knew exactly how to use it. Logan's fingers twitched against the table, tapping, then stopping, as if even rhythm had abandoned him. For once, he had no clever remark. No smirk, ready to wield like a shield. Leah shifted in her seat, her breath quick and shallow. She looked at me as though I'd grown a second face. Her fork, still balanced over her half-finished fillet, trembled before she set it down gently, too gently, as if afraid of breaking the silence further. His fiancée was indeed subtle. She pulled her phone out beneath the table, scrolling with her head bent low, her screen lighting her face in cold blue. I caught the flicker of the Thornton & Vale homepage in the reflection of her wine glass. My son's voice, when it came, was paper thin. Half a million. I dabbed at the corner of my mouth with my napkin.com as the storm I knew was rising in him. That's the current figure. It happens sometimes. Vendors fall behind on large payments. Leah choked on a breath. That's not possible. Her words didn't surprise me. People often confuse their lack of knowledge with the impossibility of truth. Logan finally leaned forward, elbows heavy against the polished wood. His arrogance had slipped, but pride still held his shoulders. I thought you were retired, he said again, slower this time. Like he was hoping repetition would make the reality bend. I never said that. I folded the napkin neatly beside my plate. You just assumed it. He blinked, shaking his head faintly, as if clearing fog. But you've been living in that same little house, driving this same car. Yes, it runs. Why would I need another? Leah's voice cracked. But the coupons, the clipped articles, the way you... She stopped, realizing the picture she had painted of me wasn't just wrong, but insulting. I let her silence sit. Silence teaches faster than words. Then, softly, I said, just because I can afford caviar doesn't mean I enjoy wasting money. I was clipping coupons, because I value what's mine. The waiter reappeared at the edge of the room, clutching the dessert tray. His hands trembled slightly, the porcelain rattling against the cart. He didn't know whether to serve us or retreat. I spared him a glance and a small nod. He disappeared, grateful. Logan exhaled, rubbing his temple. This doesn't make sense. All these years. If you've had this company, Thornton & Vale, I said the name clearly, letting it hang in the air, watching the way it landed. I co-founded it 12 years ago. We design experiences, luxury events, state galas, corporate launches. Every room you've walked into that felt seamless, intentional, that was my team. His fiance's phone slipped slightly in her hands. She looked up at me, her face pale. "I've seen that name," she whispered. "On the Met Gala program, on the UN Gala brief." I smiled faintly. We did both. Her jaw fell open, and for the first time all evening, she looked less like Logan's accessory and more like a woman confronting something she couldn't laugh off. Logan scoffed, but the sound was hollow. "You never said a word." "I did," I corrected gently. "You just weren't listening. You called it a side hustle. Told me to think about retirement before it was too late." The silence returned. Thicker now? Not of mockery, but of reckoning. And that's when memory pulled me backward, tugging me into the years they had erased with their assumptions. I remembered the night I sold my wedding ring. The man at the pawn shop had been kind in his way. He'd slid the band across the counter, weighed it, pressed his lips together as though apologizing before he spoke. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to pay Logan's tuition deposit. Enough to keep him dreaming. I'd walked out into the rain, the imprint of that ring still warm against my finger. By the time I reached home, he was asleep on the couch, his acceptance letter spread across his chest like a badge of honor. I stood there in the doorway, soaked, watching him breathe, and thought, this is what love is supposed to look like. He never asked how I managed. He never guessed what it cost. He just thanked me, casually, like a man ordering coffee, and I let him. Because silence was easier than confession. The restaurant air smelled faintly of rosemary and seared butter. But beneath it lingered something sour the unease. Now sitting across from me, Leah cleared her throat, her voice hushed. "So all this time, we thought you were struggling. And you were." She faltered. "Building an empire. Building a life," I corrected. Her eyes darted to Logan, searching for reassurance. He gave none. His smirk had drained entirely, leaving something rawer, smaller. I didn't press. I didn't need to. The weight of truth presses better than any lecture. Instead, I sipped my water and set the glass down gently. I didn't want applause while I was doing it. I wanted love as your mother. Not as someone to resent, not as someone to compete with. Just me. The tears threatened, but I pressed them back with the discipline of years spent in boardrooms. Tears never close deals. But this wasn't a deal. This was worse. This was family. Logan's voice cracked when he spoke again. "So you've just been hiding?" "No." I met his gaze steadily. "You simply weren't looking." The silence was suffocating now. Suspense, heavy and unresolved. They wanted answers, but not the kind I was ready to give. Not yet. Because suspense, I've learned, is power. And power, when revealed too quickly, loses its shape. So I waited. And when the moment was right, when their faces carried both shame and curiosity, I added, "There's more you don't know. More than you're ready to know. But tonight, you'll see." Their eyes sharpened. Confusion mingled with something almost like fear. The suspense was working, and if they wanted to break it, they'd have to follow me into the dark. Logan reached for his wine glass, missed it once, then caught it on the second try. His fingers weren't steady. That was new. My son, who never trembled, who laughed through losses and sneered through victories, was suddenly unsure of the ground beneath him. The glass clinked against his teeth before he pulled it away. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked finally, his voice lower now, quieter. I tilted my head. "Would it have changed how you treated me?" The question hung between us, heavier than the chandeliers swaying overhead. Leah flinched as if the words had landed on her. She stared at the tablecloth, her polished nails tapping an uneven rhythm against her water glass. His fiancée, too young to hide her shock, still scrolled frantically under the table, her thumb moving faster and faster as she pieced together headlines I already knew she'd find. Founder. Hidden in plain sight. The woman behind Thornton and Vale. An empire in silence. I didn't need to see the articles. I'd written those lines with my choices. Logan's jaw worked, the muscle twitching. Of course, it would have changed things. We would have. His voice cracked and he stopped, realizing that any ending to that sentence would betray him. Would have respected me? Would have listened? Would have stopped laughing? I spared him the humiliation of finishing it. Instead, I asked, "Do you remember when you were 16 and the power was cut off?" His brow furrowed. "What?" "You came home and the lights wouldn't turn on. You were angry, embarrassed. You said I had failed. You didn't ask why?" His lips parted. No sound came. I worked 3 nights straight after that. I continued softly. I walked dogs in the rain, washed linens in a hotel basement, did whatever I had to. And the lights came back. You never asked how. You never thanked me. You just assumed it was solved. Leah's hand found her napkin, twisting it tight. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. She knew better than to argue with memory. Logan shifted, leaning back, but his confidence had nowhere left to go. He stared at me like I'd grown thorns. "You think silence is noble," he muttered. "I think silence is survival." I replied. The waiter returned timidly, this time with desserts balanced like treasures. Chocolate souffle, lemon tart, creme brulee with its sugar top shining like glass. He set them down quietly, eyes darting between us, the awkward witness to a truth too sharp to ignore. "Thank you," I murmured. He nodded and disappeared again. No one reached for the desserts. They sat untouched, the sweet smells clashing with the bitterness in the room. I let the silence stretch. Suspense thrives in silence. It grows, coils, tightens, until even a breath feels dangerous. Finally, Leah broke. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I thought we knew you. All these years, I thought we knew." "You knew the version you wanted to see," I said. "The mother who folded your laundry and clipped coupons and said yes when you rolled your eyes. That version was comfortable for you." Her eyes welled. "That version was real." "Yes," I agreed, softly. "But it wasn't the whole of me." Logan slammed his palm against the table suddenly, the sound shattering the quiet. Plates rattled. His fiancée jumped. Leah gasped. Tabhi leaned forward, eyes burning. "So what now, Mom?" "You sit here and gloat. You let us feel small because you've been playing queen all these years." My lips curved faintly. "You already felt small. That had nothing to do with me." His face darkened. And for a moment I saw the boy again, the boy who hated losing board games, who cried when he wasn't first, who believed the world owed him crowns. But now he was grown. And those same flaws wore suits and watches instead of scraped knees. I didn't flinch under his glare. Suspense isn't about meeting anger with anger. It's about waiting long enough for the other person to hear their own voice echo back at them. And Logan did. The silence after his outburst rang louder than the slap of his hand. His fiancée cleared her throat, her voice timid. I think it's amazing what you've built. To do all that alone." Her words trailed off, realizing she'd wandered into dangerous territory. Logan's head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. She shrank back. I turned to her instead. "Thank you," I said gently. "It wasn't easy, but it mattered." Her cheeks flushed. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost, Logan dragged a hand down his face. "This doesn't feel real." "It never does," I said. "Truth rarely arrives when you're ready." Memory pulled again, a tide I couldn't fight. I saw myself in the boardroom years ago, standing before a dozen men in tailored suits. My slides had glowed on the screen, projections, budgets, visions sharp enough to cut glass. They had smirked, whispered, doubted. Until I spoke. Until my voice steadied. Precise told them exactly how I would build an empire from whispers and rented linens. By the end of that meeting, they'd stopped smirking. By the end of that year, they had stopped doubting. But my children, they never even asked. The souffle-esque surface cracked as the heat faded. Leah reached for her spoon. then stopped halfway, setting it down again. Her appetite was gone. Logan stared at me across the candlelight, his eyes searching, restless. "So what else?" he demanded. "What else don't we know?" I folded my hands neatly on the table. "More than you think. Less than you fear." He slammed back in his chair. "You're playing games." "No," I said calmly. "I'm building suspense. You'd be surprised how much more you listen when silence does the talking." His laugh was bitter. "You sound like some storyteller." "Maybe I am." I leaned back slightly, letting the shadows claim my face. "Every family has a story. Ours just isn't finished yet. And you've only read the first chapter." The unease thickened, seeping into every corner of the room. And then I spoke the words I had been waiting to release. "The hook sharp enough to draw blood tonight isn't over. There's something I need to show you. Something you've forgotten." Their heads snapped toward me. Logan's eyes narrowed. Leah's lips parted. The fiancée clutched her phone tighter. Suspense, delicious, suffocating, exactly where I wanted them. I smiled faintly, my voice steady. "When we leave here, we're going somewhere else. Up to the roof. That's where the rest of the truth lives." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the candles seemed to hesitate in their flicker. They didn't know what waited above them. They didn't know how deep the story went. And that was the point. Because suspense is power. And power, tonight, belonged to me. The night air clung to us as we stepped out of the restaurant. The city glowed not gently, but with the hard, cold brilliance of glass towers and headlights smeared into streaks. Leah hugged her coat tighter around herself, though the air was warm. Logan walked stiffly, shoulders squared as though posture alone could anchor him. His fiancée followed half a step behind, her eyes flicking between me and her phone. Caught in the tension of watching a secret unravel, I didn't rush. Suspense never rushes. It unfolds like a slow drip, testing patience, forcing every thought to linger. A black sedan idled at the curb. The driver stepped out immediately when he saw me. His posture was perfect, professional, but deferential. Logan blinked, recognition flickering. He'd seen this driver before, but he had never asked who he worked for. The driver opened the door. "Miss Thornton." Leah's head snapped toward me. Logan hesitated, then climbed in after me, his jaw tight. The fiancé slid in silently, eyes wide. The ride was quiet. Logan's hand drummed against his knee, then stopped. He turned toward me once, as though about to ask something, but the words stuck in his throat. "Good. Let them stick." Suspense lives in the words unspoken. The car wove through the city until the towers rose higher, their tops vanishing into night. Finally, we stopped in front of a building with mirrored glass, 20 stories of sleek power. Thornton and Vale's headquarters. My name, half of it anyway, glowed discreetly on a brass plaque near the door. Leah gasped. The fiancée clapped her hand over her mouth. Logan stared, unblinking. We stepped inside. The lobby was quiet, but not empty. 2 receptionists straightened when they saw me, their greetings warm, rehearsed, genuine. "Miss Thornton." "Good evening." Logan froze at the sound of it. His fiancée's nails dug into her clutch. We moved past them, through glass doors, into the elevator. I pressed the button for the rooftop. The ride was silent except for the hum of cables. Logan stared at the floor. Leah stole glances at me, searching for something to say. The fiancé whispered rooftop. But no one answered. The doors opened, and there it was. The rooftop stretched wide. Polished tiles gleaming under strings of golden lights. Planters lined the edges, flowers carefully tended. In the center stood a small table draped in linen, 2 photographs in silver frames. One of me and their father, young, laughing, sunlight caught in our hair. The other, the last family photo before he died. Logan was 12, Leah 10. Beside the frames, a vase of fresh white lilies, and beyond it all, the city stretched endless and alive. Leah's hand flew to her mouth. "Dad?" Logan's breath caught. His knees almost buckled, but pride kept him upright. "This," I said quietly, "is why I never told you. Because all of this began here on this rooftop. Your father and I dreamed it, planned it, long before Thornton and Vale existed. He wanted me to build something that lasted. Something for you. For us, I walked to the table, my hand brushing the frames. When he died, everyone told me to settle down, to move on, to be small. But I couldn't. Not with his voice still in my head, telling me not to stop. Leah's tears slipped free. She whispered, We thought you just faded? I turned, meeting her eyes. I didn't fade. Every single day, quietly, without applause, without recognition, because love isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. Logan stared at the photographs, his face pale, all these years. His voice broke. He looked at me, desperation breaking through his arrogance. Why didn't you ever say? I stepped closer, my voice steady, even as my heart clenched. Because you were happier believing I needed you. Happier believing I was fragile. That made you feel strong. And I loved you enough to let you believe it. His lips parted, but no words came. The silence swallowed him whole. Leah sobbed openly now, clutching the edge of the table as though it could keep her upright. The fiancé stood frozen, unsure if she belonged in the story at all. I looked at them all, my children and the woman who might join them, and let the truth sit heavy. Suspense was no longer needed. The reveal was here. Everything I've built, I said softly, was for this family. For the memory of your father. For the dream we started together. Thornton and Vale isn't just a company. It's a promise. A bond. I paused, my eyes narrowing just slightly. My words sharp enough to slice. And bonds, as you know, can shatter when they are taken for granted. Logan flinched. Leah sobbed harder. The fiancée dropped her phone, the clatter echoing. I let the silence hold. Then added quieter. That's why you should remember what I'm telling you tonight. Not because I'm wealthy. Not because I fooled you. But because you laughed at me. And laughter leaves scars deeper than poverty ever could. The city lights burned around us. The rooftop air pressed in. Suspense had given way to reckoning. Finally, I turned away, my hand brushing the frame of my late husband's smile. We're done here. Tomorrow, the story continues. Tonight, I think you've heard enough. And with that, walk back toward the elevator, my children and their silence trailing behind me like shadows. That night was never just about money. It was about memory, love, grief, and the fragile threads we pretend will never break. It was about bonds that looked unshakable from a distance, but up close revealed their cracks. And in that silence, on that rooftop, I knew part of them would never look at me the same again, which was exactly the point. The rooftop door closed behind me, but I could still hear the silence trailing after. It was thicker than the night air, heavier than the weight of the city itself. For a moment, I stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, breathing in the faint scent of lilies, staring at the city glittering beneath me. It wasn't triumph that sat in my chest. It wasn't even anger. It was something colder, older, sharper. Vindication. Behind me, the elevator dinged open again. Logan stepped out first, stiff and awkward, as though the skyline might swallow him whole. Leah followed, her mascara smudged from tears. The fiancé trailed behind, phone still in her hand. Her expression unsettled, the look of someone who had stepped into a story too big for her. They approached quietly. As though this rooftop were a cathedral, Logan broke the silence. Mom, I didn't know. The words floated uselessly. You didn't ask, I said. He flinched, but I didn't soften it. Suspense feeds not on cruelty, but on honesty sharpened to a blade. Leah's voice cracked. Why would you hide something like this from us? I turned toward her. Would you have believed me? Would you have listened when I said I wasn't fragile, wasn't simple, wasn't safe? She swallowed, unable to answer. Logan shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair, as though trying to shake the weight of everything he'd dismissed for years. The fiancée finally spoke, her voice small. Everyone knows Thornton and Vale. I've seen the name at events. Luxury hotels, political summits. You're that Thornton. I am, I said flatly. But I didn't want my family to measure me in press releases. I wanted them to measure me in love, Logan muttered. And we failed. I didn't deny it. We sat around the rooftop table, though no one touched the desserts waiting downstairs. The city stretched on, buzzing beneath us, and above, only silence, stars hidden by smog. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the night pull me into memory. Do you remember, I asked softly, when you both begged for a dog? Leah sniffled. Dad said no. I smiled faintly. He did. He said we couldn't afford it. But what he didn't tell you was that he was already sick. He didn't want you to watch something else die too soon. Their faces shifted grief, confusion, guilt. I let the silence simmer before continuing. You remember him as strong, but I watched him weaken. I watched the man I loved slip away. And I swore to myself that when he was gone, I would become strong enough for all of us. Logan's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have done it alone. I tilted my head. Would you have helped me then, at 12? At 18, when you were calling me for rent deposits? At 24, when you laughed at my business cards and called them a hobby? His mouth opened, then shut. Suspense held him in its grip, the truth squeezing tighter than any mother's lecture could. The hours stretched. They asked questions haltingly at first, then in a rush. Did you plan that gala? Did you meet those people? Were you there when the cameras flashed? I answered only what I wished. Never too much. Never enough for them to feel comfortable again. Suspense thrives in the gaps, Leah whispered. I feel like I don't even know you. I reached across the table, laying my hand over hers. You've always known me? You just never looked past the story you preferred to believe. Her tears spilled again, but she didn't pull away. Logan stood abruptly, pacing the rooftop edge. So what now? You've proven your point. You've shown us we underestimated you. What do you want from us? The question cut deeper than he realized. I don't want anything, I said. I never did. All I wanted was to be loved without condition. Not as a provider. Not as a spectacle. Just as your mother. His pacing slowed. He rubbed his temple like the weight of every selfish assumption was pressing down at once when midnight approached. I stood, smoothing my coat. There's something I prepared for tonight. For your father, from the far side of the rooftop, soft music rose. A jazz trio, the same songs he used to play on Sunday mornings, humming along while the kids begged for pancakes. The sound was warm, familiar, haunting. A waiter wheeled out a cart, covered in linen. On it sat a plum tart, the kind your father used to sneak from the bakery down on Jefferson Street. Leah gasped. Logan froze. I wanted tonight to be more than a reveal, I said quietly. I wanted it to be a remembrance. We stood together around the photographs, the lilies glowing in candlelight. For once, there were no clever remarks, no smugness, no judgments. Just silence and the weight of absence. I lit a single candle, placing it between the frames. My hand trembled, but not from weakness, from memory. For him, I whispered. The trio played on. The city roared beneath us. But here, in this suspended moment, time felt fragile. When the candle burned low, I finally turned back to them. This is the part of the evening you won't find in headlines. No one will write about it. No one will photograph it. But it's the only part that matters. Leah wiped her face with shaking hands. Mom, I'm sorry. I touched her cheek gently. Don't be sorry. Be better. Logan's eyes glistened, though he refused to let the tears fall. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Not arrogance, not pity, but awe mixed with shame. I owe you more than I can ever repay, he murmured. I nodded once. Yes, you do. But I never wanted repayment. I wanted respect. He lowered his head when we finally left the rooftop. The valet brought my car around instantly, bowing slightly. Ms. Thornton, Logan stared at the exchange, his face unreadable. As I stepped into the car, I paused, turning back to them. Wealth isn't always loud, I said softly. But it remembers who laughed. Neither of them replied. They didn't need to. The door closed, sealing me in silence. The city rolled past the windows, neon lights smearing into memory. That night was not the end. It was the fracture line, the moment where love and ignorance collided. where illusions shattered and bonds trembled. But bonds, as fragile as they are, can be rebuilt if those who broke them are willing to face the truth. And truth, as I've always known, is the sharpest suspense of all. So if you've followed me through this story, through the silences, the reveals, the grief, and the power hidden in plain sight, then you know what it means when I say this. Family bonds may bend, may crack, may splinter. But when they shatter, the echoes last a lifetime. And those echoes, they're what we explore here, together. Subscribe to Shattered Bonds if you want more stories like this. Stories that peel back the polite smiles and expose what lies beneath. Because this one was just the beginning.